Mini-series are not something confined to TV. Starting today, we'll read from the 13th chapter of Matthew for 3 weekends in a row. Call it a scriptural mini-series. Within chapter 13, there are 7 parables trying to describe the invitation that you and I receive to believe. Several of them will begin with the phrase, "The kingdom of heaven is like." This week's selection uses an image from an agricultural practice of the day that you and I might find a bit strange. In the time of Jesus, the seed was scattered, and then the earth was plowed, the opposite of our contemporary practice. Apparently the system worked, but seems inefficient in the way it spread the seed on sections which would not produce much or anything in the harvest. It reminds me of my time in Washington, which is a place that does not do snow well. I was waiting to turn on this major street, Rhode Island Avenue, and a sander came down the street, followed by the plow. In the parable today, Jesus talks about some seed, the word, falling on the path, some on rocky ground which had no depth, and others among thorns which choked the growth, and finally, some fell on good soil, which produced an abundant harvest. The seed in the parable is really the invitation that you and I have to follow Christ, and it's extended to all, kind of a raw data. The reception by the soil are the different responses to the word. What might this mean for you and me this morning? Well, since we're listening in the church to this story, it can be presumed that we all have made some sort of positive response to the invitation to follow Christ. Consequently, it seems unlikely that we would compare ourselves to the footpath, wherein the seed took no root whatsoever. But we probably do not fare as well in the other areas. Could we not be the rocky ground, which produces some harvest, but in tough times we find we have no depth? Are things going on in our lives which tend to make us doubt God's love, care, and forgiveness? Do we simply give up when it gets rough? Or are we growing among thorns, pursuing interests which run directly contrary to the gospel? Our business practices, our personal habits, which are inconsistent with true spiritual growth. Or are we the good soil, providing a positive atmosphere and reception to God's word and trying to do our best to produce an abundant harvest? I tend to think that we are often a combination of all of them. Sometimes at different times of our lives, and sometimes at the same time, but dealing with different issues in different ways. Are we sometimes really enthusiastic and intent upon bringing about some changes in our life, but then we lose the enthusiasm as though we have no real depth? At other times, do we allow ourselves to be choked by the thorns of pursuits contrary to the gospel? What really rules our lives? The desire to succeed at all costs? If we are not driven by the gospel values to love and serve the other, then we're like the seed that produces no harvest. Perhaps today can be an occasion to remind ourselves of the invitation we have all received and ask, what is my response? A time to look at our lives in a more objective manner and see how we might need to introduce some changes in our lives that will improve the harvest we produce. Stay tuned to the second part of the series for next weekend.